Look, I think it's going to move the needle. I mean, I think especially in China, there's definitely what I'd call pent-up demand. I think street numbers continue to be pretty conservative to maybe low, and I think that's a great setup. Look, the reality is that this is not going to be a super cycle. There's nothing here that makes you think that this is going to be the game changer that everyone's been waiting for. But I do believe, given the install base, given some of the tweaks here, and ultimately on sort of the second half of this upgrade cycle, you will have an AI-driven ecosystem. I believe it will be Google Gemini. This could be a sneaky upgrade cycle that I think surprises investors on the upside.
What do you mean?
Because right now, expectations, New York City cab drivers bearish on Apple. And I think that what I like about the setup is it's kind of left behind. Now, a lot of that's been self-inflicted because every Apple event feels like I feel like Michael J. Fox and Back to the Future. So they continue to be left behind AI. But now with the Google DOJ issue in the rear view, they will double down ultimately on that Gemini partnership. And when you look at the install base, I think Street is underestimating what numbers look like for iPhone when you look out over the next 6, 9, 12 months. And I think in big tech, I view Apple from a sentiment perspective relative to where I viewed Alphabet maybe about 6 months ago.
You, in your note ahead of the launch, called Apple's AI strategy, quote, invisible. You said the elephant in the room and is the black over the stock. AI's invisible, or Apple's invisible AI strategy. Did you get any more information today at the launch about its strategy?
I mean, I think fundamentally they're keeping it close to the vest, right? Like, in other words, like it continues to be that black cloud. I think they're waiting for ultimately what's going to be Gemini, because I think they had a choice: either go down the route with Perplexity and ultimately look to acquire that, or if it was a favorable ruling, then the candlelight dinner with Google and Sundar could ultimately start again, and then you could actually double down that partnership. And that is, I believe, the direction. But look, Tim, they got it was a black eye moment a year ago when they laid out the AI strategy. Maybe 95% of that had a backtrack on.
Well, now they've lost a lot of the senior executives that were working on that to Meta platforms.
And we've talked about there's a better chance of me playing Ryder Cup Bethpage than any internal AI strategy happening at Apple.
But is that such a bad thing? And this is one of the things that, Dan, we talk a lot about, that maybe Apple's just kind of watching. There's a lot of money sloshing around trying to figure out what ultimately are the standards, the methods, the companies that really dominate, right, in terms of AI kind of protocols. And maybe Apple's like, I'll just watch, and then we'll figure it out. Is that bad?
I think it's bad. I'd compare it to like Saturday night in New York City. There's a restaurant where there's one person in there at 8:30. Like, oh, they must know something everyone else does. I'd rather go to the place where people are lining up outside. When it comes to ultimately AI, time's not on their side. Look what OpenAI, look at Meta, wartime CEO, look at Microsoft, look what Google's done. That's why you is an all-time high. So I do believe Cook's recognized it, but the problem is that now it's a go-time moment when it comes to AI. And that, look, we've talked about it. That's how you get to $325, $350, $400 stock is AI, relative to right now Apple. They're kind of on the outside looking in of that AI party where it's still 10 p.m. going to 4 a.m.
Just want to mention a headline crossing. We are talking, of course, with Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities. Right now, the Supreme Court will review President Trump's tariffs on a fast-track schedule. This is expected to take place in early November, and this has to do with these tariffs that he has imposed and whether or not that he really had the right to impose this. It's typically the congressional actions that allow for that. So that's something that's certainly on our radar, and it could have a big impact.
If we had more time with Dan, we would talk tariffs and Apple, but we're not going to do that because everyone wants to know about what the heck is going on over at Eightco Holdings. You're chairman of this company now. I think it took a lot of people by surprise. It's a crypto treasury firm, and for those who aren't familiar with the way this works, it's a Michael Saylor strategy, but with a different cryptocurrency. This is Worldcoin, backed by Sam Altman, eyeball scanning stuff. What is going on here?
So I wouldn't have done this as chairman if it was just a regular token DAX strategy. The reason I did this, it has to do with Sam. It has to do with my view world is going to be a de facto standard for identification, authentication in terms of human proof in AI world. This is much more of a tech infrastructure play than what I'd say a traditional crypto play. So obviously, the reason I'm so excited about it is really this is going to become, I think, a huge part of the story and the narrative. It's really an intersection of AI and crypto.
Explain that, Dan, though.
So what that means is, as Tim talked about, it's iris scan, the orbs.
Right.
Going forward in the future, especially in a robotic world, bots everywhere, you're not going to be able to just identify through a blue check. It's really going to be iris scanning. What they've done already, 15 million humans on the platform, I believe going to about 100 million over the next year. That's going to be a form of identification that's probably the most privacy lockbox out there, and it's secured by a token, a world token. So my view and our view as a team, this is early days in terms of where this is all heading, and that's why we want to do the strategy now.
What's to prevent somebody else from doing the same thing?
They're playing a different game than they're NVIDIA in 2022. In other words, like relative to what Sam, Alex, and the team have built out, I mean, from an infrastructure and authentication perspective, they are, I think, miles ahead. I don't see anyone that could catch them. That's why we bet on World as part of the Eightco strategy, and obviously having someone like Tom Lee and Bitminer, huge, big investor, that's another support that we're so excited to have.
You've also got an ETF that launched back in June. It's the Dan Ives Wedbush AI Revolution ETF. It's up 16% since launch. It's outperforming the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. Broadcom, Google, NVIDIA, TSMC, Apple, they're the top holdings. Somebody watching right now might be like, okay, he's got a clothing company. He's chairman of this crypto treasury company. He has this day job at Wedbush. How am I sure that he's going to manage this ETF and have the time and resources to manage this ETF in my interest?
I think that's a great question. I'd say when you think about my chairman role, it's all related to AI and the infrastructure. In other words, this is interrelated to my view of where the AI revolution gets built out. And the reality is that 95% of my time is spent, 3.5 million air miles the last 25 years. I think what's enabled to distinguish us is feet on the ground, talking, whether it's private, public, partners. And really, I think that's how investors have grown to.
Do you add Eightco Holdings to the Ives ETF?
No, that would be it's a total separate operation.
How do you keep firewalls between it, though?
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be people who are saying, yeah, of course Dan's going to talk up that he loves Alphabet and that he loves NVIDIA. I mean, he's got an ETF. Like, how do we,
on the ETF, and that's
like, we lean on you for,
and remember, the
transparent
ETF,
views.
and part of how investors know us, the ETF is all based on our Ives AI 30. It's all based on our research. So the reality is, I think part of how we've gotten so, I'd say from an investor perspective, we've had massive, I think reception for the ETF is because it's our 30 names that ultimately we view as the winners, and we change that every quarter, and that's, I think, you talk about ETF, what it's based on. It's all based on the research, and got everyone here that knows Dan Ives, they know, like, feet on the street, not sitting there in some Peter Millar 15th floor of a New York City office building, and the only time you travel is 2 times to San Francisco.
Yeah, you just got back from Australia.
Yeah, so I literally landed here from Australia.
What were you doing there?
Yeah, so part work, part pleasure. So it's fun because, look, I mean, when we talk AI revolution, like in Sydney, in Melbourne, packed meetings, because the reality is that this is not just U.S., and that's why I spend so much of my time traveling around the globe.
What might be the irrational exuberance part of kind of the trade today, or the tech trade, or the AI trade? And just got about 30 seconds. There's got to be some fluff out
just
there.
Because you say AI 40 times in a conference call doesn't make yourself an AI name. Look, just because, like Tim, he was wearing an AI shirt, because he says it 15 times and says Tim on the back AI, it doesn't. My view is you have to distinguish the winners and the real ones from the fakes. And that's the reality. And look, that's what we spend all of our time doing.
The one company you're most bullish on right now, public company.
Messi of AI, Palantir. That's going to $1 trillion next 2 or 3 years. And I always say the haters hate it at 15, despise it at 80, say it's super expensive at 150. They'll be saying the same thing at $1 trillion.